Hello book lovers, welcome to Uncommon Reader. My name is Daniela, and in this video I'm going to share some of my summer reads that I've enjoyed so far, that I gave 4 to 5 stars. The beautiful thing about this bunch of books is that all the stories come from different parts of the world. They cover 4 out of 5 continents. Only Australia is left out this time. So let's embark in this journey. It might be a little long, this video, but I decided that most of the time trying to be concise, and then while I'm editing the video, I end up saying, oh, I forgot to say that thing. So I'm gonna take my time, also take some breaks, because in this heat, the phone might overheat and I myself might overheat. So I'm gonna take it easy though and say all I have to say about these books. And then, you know, I might just cut it out in the editing process, but I will add the timestamps. So if you get bored, you can simply skip to the next section. So before I start talking about the books I have in the list today, I do want to give a shout out to The Island of Missing Trees by Elif Shafak, which was also one of my 4 stars reads this summer. And I have already dedicated a video to this book. So I will leave a link up here and in the info box so you can watch it later if you're curious. But I'm going to take you now to Paris, and we're going to travel from Paris to India with The Perfumist of Paris by Alka, which is the 3rd book of the Jaipur trilogy. I enjoyed all 3 books. The first one is The Henna Artist, which I think is the most popular of the 3. And it featured Lakshmi, who was a rebellious woman who actually was abused by her husband and was able to escape. And it's a beautiful story of women empowerment and emancipation. And she is able to build a career in Jaipur until her sister comes by and creates a lot of havoc. In the second book, The Secret Keeper of Jaipur, both sisters are the protagonists, and a lot of things happen in that book. Just to cut a long story short, in The Perfumist of Paris, the undiscussed protagonist is Radha, Lakshmi's sister. And she is now married. The first book starts in the 50s, and now we are in the mid-70s in Paris. Radha has married a French man and has 2 daughters. She's trying to build up her career as a perfumist. She lands a very special job, which is to create some fragrances for a set of perfumes inspired by paintings depicting women. For example, very famous by Impressionist Edouard Manet, the Olympia. So she decides that she needs to find some special ingredients, and she decides to fly to India. And that's where also she gets reunited with her sister. Of course, there are many things happening in this book, but I'm not going to dwell much on the plot. What I can tell you is that I totally love Alka narrative style, because it's filled with twists and turns. So in every chapter, there is something to look forward to the story and keep going, a real page turner. What didn't make the 5 stars for me is that I totally love The Henna Artist and Lakshmi's story. So emotionally, I was more connected to her character. And in this book, we don't see much of Lakshmi. And I'm not being much of a fan of Radha in the first 2 books. I'm not as invested emotionally. But I do have to give it out to Alka. Her narrative is really enticing, and the book is really enjoyable. So 4 star it is for The Perfumist of Paris. So next book is The First Ladies by Mary Benedict and Victoria Christopher Murray. I've already mentioned this book just a few days ago during the Phenomenal Woman book tag. And I will leave a link to that video as well. I'm just going to repeat briefly myself how thoroughly I enjoyed the friendship between First Lady Eleanor Roosevelt and Mary McLeod Bethune, who was an African-American activist. they lived a very secret friendship because at those times it wasn't allowed for African Americans and white people to establish friendships and being seen in public together, or, you know, just simply having coffee, or even touching or hugging or shaking hands. It's just like unbelievable. I mean, I just can't fathom, but that was the laws at that time. And for me, it was quite remarkable to learn what they did together, what they accomplished together. Because through this friendship, Eleanor Roosevelt really learned the problematics aspects of African-American lives. And even the Democratic Party wasn't really doing much for African-Americans. And through this special friendship, we see so many details of all the projects that Eleanor and Mary worked together. And so that aspect was really refreshing and inspiring for me. There's also certain areas where they were definitely fictionized, because of course we didn't know where they would meet up, although they might have some hints through some of the letters that they were also found later on. There's also a part which is a bit more gossipy, which relates to their personal lives, both Mary and Eleanor. Eleanor was suffering from her husband, was cheating her with her best friend, and it was a recurrent situation. They didn't have anymore a husband and wife relationship, although they stayed married. So Eleanor was suffering a lot from that. But there was also hints of her special friendship with a female journalist. That was also confirmed later on as we read in the final notes at the end of the book. I love that part of books, by the way, especially with historical novels where the authors tell you what was real in the book and what was added to make the book flow. And so they did find letters of this journalist that was a reporter during the presidential campaign. And so they did have a romantic liaison. Something I didn't know, but I guess I really didn't care about that part, because for me, at least, historical, what these two women did together was truly remarkable. So I took a little break and moved the plant, because it felt like behind me it was giving me hair coming out of my neck. So there you go, my darling. I'm gonna take you to India now with Gun Island by Amitav Ghosh. This was such a surprise book for me, because the book was actually, the author was recommended to me, and I actually had some reservations, not about the author, but about this book in specific, because it was the only book that I found from him. The person that recommended me this author was mentioning other books, but the Gun Island was the only book that I found at my local library when I was in California in July. And so the story plot looked really, really complicated, and I'm not so big in adventurous books where crazy things happen. So I had some reservations, and I will actually need to look at my notes to tell you a little bit about this book, because it's so complicated. The protagonist is Dean, who is a dealer of rare books. He's living in New York, but he is Indian, he's from Calcutta, and he's fascinated by, of course, all these legends from his country, and he bumps into the story of this character called Bunduki Sadagar, who is a wealthy merchant who had angered Masana Devi, who was the goddess of snakes and all other poisonous creatures, by refusing to become her devotee. She decided to torment this guy with all sorts of calamities, so he tried to escape and find refuge across the sea in a land called Gun Island. But to no avail, because she's a goddess, so she knows where he's hiding. So she hunts him down, and she forces him to build a shrine for her. So this stays like a nice legend that is, you know, keeping in mind maybe for some stories to tell, until he finds out that the shrine really exists. His aunt, while he's visiting Calcutta, he goes back and forth from New York to Calcutta for work sometimes. And his aunt is sort of pushing him, you know, this is a true story. Why don't you look out for this shrine? I've seen it. So he gets a little curious to find out where the shrine is. But the shrine is supposed to be hidden in the Sundarbans mangrove forest, which are very dangerous because they're infested with tigers and snakes. So not a good place to go. But so things move on, and I'm not gonna dwell in telling you what's happening next, but what's important for me to tell you is that if this was not my kind of story, it just became my kind of story, because I was immediately pulled in thanks to the powerful writing of Amitav Ghosh. Simple, but at the same time, very effective. So for me, that's sometimes the language that's used with adventurous books. It's a little redundant. Instead, he was able to just, in the complexity of the story, keeping the language very nice, but at the same time also articulate. It wasn't, you know, simple. Simple in the sense that it was linear, understandable. It would flow really well. At the same time, another aspect that I liked about the book, and sometimes when you approach adventurous books, there are many, many characters that come and go. You just see them for, you know, just a few pages. And that sometimes for me, it's a distraction. I feel it takes away from the main story, and I feel like, why do I need to read about this character? It's not related to the story. Instead, all the various encounters that Dean will have during this big adventures of his, which will end up in Venice of all places, are very pertinent, but even if they're not pertinent, you learn something very, very interesting. I'm going to give you an example, because although I've had to return the book at the library, I did take a photo of one part of these anecdotes that it's pertinent to a word that has a very negative connotation right now. And so we are in Venice. This is what the person that he's speaking to while in Venice tells him. This island that was allotted to the Jews had previously been a foundry where armaments, including bullets, were cast. The word for foundry in the Old Venetian dialect was getto. And this had become the name of the city's Jewish settlement. Not only would the settlement become a great center for Jewish learning, it would also lead to coining of certain words, of which ghetto was only one. So you see, the word ghetto has now a very negative connotation, but at the time it was, you know, like the learning city of the Jews in Venice. It was the Jewish quarter. So to learn how times give different connotation to the words, for me was very interesting. And the book is filled with these enlightening notions about many other things. So I was really fully embracing this book and enjoying every page, and I look forward to read more from this author. So next book to discuss is Cutting for Stone by Abraham Verghese. So I'm just going to give you a few details of how the book begins, because I was a little perplexed. So we're in a scene where a woman gives birth to twins, and when we find out that she is an Indian nun that is working as a nurse, like an assistant to this doctor in this Ethiopian hospital. And he's the father of these newborns, but he doesn't know. So I'm like, he's totally unaware that he had sex with an Indian nun that's also his assistant. So the story wasn't too credible at the beginning for me. But he was very drunk when they had intercourse. So I guess, you know, it could be the case. I'm not sure, because I've never gotten as drunk to not remember what I did. But anyway, unfortunately, she dies. And he's so distraught finding out that these are their babies, because he didn't even know she was pregnant, because she was wearing nun dresses or whatever. So yeah, it's weird, right? But these two twins, they are raised by another doctor who works at the hospital, and another woman who's a gynecologist at the same hospital. And they kind of form a couple. In time, they will become, you know, united and husband and wife. And the kids are very loved by these two, and they grow up as every twins do, being very close to each other. And also they would sleep with their heads touching. So a very, very tight bond between the two. Then a girl that is the daughter of one of their workers at the house of these adopting parents, becomes their friends. But as they grow up, she will create a lot of problems and tensions also between the two brothers. And then something happens when one of the two twins has to escape Ethiopia, and he lands working as a doctor, because in the meantime they've grown up and become both doctors. He's moving to New York, where he's going to work in the Bronx. In the meantime, their father finally, you know, shows up for a series of circumstances. So the story will sort of develop in other directions that I'm not going to expose, because I've given way many details already. There are some very, very emotional parts in this book, very well narrated. I love Abraham Verghese's style, but for me, if this book would have been a bit shorter, maybe 200 pages shorter, it would have had a different impact on me. I think it would have flown better. I think some parts were really, really unnecessary. Being a doctor, Verghese has been very thorough, explaining certain surgery operations, and so I really didn't feel that I needed to know all those details. It was a little slow, that's where I wanted to get, but the book, it still, you know, had a lot of emotional moments and dramatic twists, so I think it's still worth 4 stars. So I do need my glasses to tell you a little bit about this book. It was very emotional. A Day in the Life of Abed Salama by Thrall. This was a Pulitzer Prize winner for general nonfiction this year. This is based on true events, and the little protagonist is Milad Salama, who's a 5-year-old who is excited for a school trip, going to a theme park on the outskirts of Jerusalem. On the way, this bus collides with a semi-trailer, creating a very dramatic accident. His father, Abed, gets word of the crash and rushes to the site. The scene is chaos. The children have taken to different hospitals in Jerusalem and the West Bank. Some of the kids are missing, and others cannot be identified, burned. Abed sets off on an odyssey to learn Milad's fate. So he goes into this phase where he's trying to get through various hospitals. And in Jerusalem, you being a Palestinian, you have to have different types of passes depending where you're needing to go. So it's a very dramatic situation because you don't know anything about your kid. You don't know if he's alive, if he's dead, if he's injured, if he's safe. So the story is not only disturbing because of Abed's odyssey looking for his kid. We also go through other similar stories of other parents that they have the same problem. We also learn a lot from Abed's story, his origins, his family, and all the people he's surrounded, of course, in this ordeal, because of course then we hear about his wife and his brother that are trying to be helpful. And just the women that are waiting at home, you know, to get news. So it's a very dramatic book because you think it's also based on a true story. This accident really happened, and all these problems about moving around the city really existed, and delayed rescue efforts as well. So I found very profound certain aspects of this book relating to certain interactions and relationship between Jewish and Palestinians who are trying to help each other. And these efforts and relationships are particularly touching considering what's going on right now between Palestine and Israel. And if it would only be about, you know, not about politics, but about human relationships and neighborhoods, right? And being able to help each other and sustain and support each other through thick and thin. It was for me a really great message. Politicians have no clue what's going on and in the real world. I think I'm very sad about it. This being united over a tragedy makes you think, you know. And for me, this was a really beautiful story. Some parts were a bit long because in narrating Abed's story about the family ramifications, sometimes I would get lost, but at the same time, historically speaking, there's a lot of details as well about how Jerusalem is divided, and some history about how the city was divided. That was interesting, but at the same time maybe narrated more like a history book than a novel. So for me, the attention span sometimes was a bit lost, and also because there's so many notions, and how can you remember that amount of notions? But still quite an emotional read when we would be transported again on Abed's odyssey looking for his son. That's why not 5 but 4 stars for me. So if you endured with me all this time, we now come to my 5 stars book of the summer for now. It's The Prophet Song by Paul Lynch. This was the Booker Prize winner in 2023, and hell does it deserve it. I truly enjoyed this book, which is a dystopian. So I have to confess right away, I'm not big on dystopian stories, but the ones I read and I like, they're gonna be 5 stars for me. So I have an interesting relationship with dystopians, and of course this was one I liked. I liked it because it is probable. It could happen, and so that's what's terrifying about this book. And at the same time, I mean, Paul Lynch writing, it pulls you in. It gets into your brain, into your bloodstream. It's just so powerful. The surprising factor is that the story, it's very slow. It just starts with this very slow rhythm, we enter this family. The father is a teacher, the mother is a scientist, and they have 4 kids. They're normal kids, no huge problems among them of various ages. And the dad is a teacher and somehow, you know, stays on the left side of politics, but he's not an activist. You know, he's a regular guy. All of a sudden he disappears and we don't know what happens to him. There's no way to know. There are inquiries to this government that it's actually turning into a tyranny, and they would not release any information. And slowly things starting to change around the house, because of course this woman has to deal with 4 kids wondering where is dad, what's going on. And slowly you start looking how things are changing at your neighbor's house, or someone else you know is disappeared as well. And so slowly changes also into their daily routines, and how the economic situation is getting worse day by day. Things get more expensive, and people are losing their jobs, other people disappear. So very slowly, like a little poison, we get involved in this story. And this is what really pulls you in, because you can't see coming, but you don't know where it's going to take you. And the kids are going to get very restless, and the older kid will want to join the resistance, because of course there will be some people that will not stand for a dictatorship, and they want to start their own army to fight the government. So there's so many things happening, but again, just drops and drops and drops and drops, and it will gradually become more and more and more dramatic. It was at the same time a very hard read, and also I couldn't put it down because I was so enamored by the language and the efficient language of Paul Lynch, describing all this situation and describing also the sentiments, the feelings, the anguish, the fear that kept growing in these characters. And it just gives you all these emotions, like you share them with the protagonists as well. So just an amazing read. So I made it through. If you're wondering, this is a Renoir painting, a little postcard that I've used to keep myself alive during this video, which I hope you have enjoyed. Let me know what you think about these books in the comments. I thank you so much for watching this video with me today. I look forward to see you soon here on Uncommon Reader. Thank you for your support. I look forward to talk to you in the comments, and I wish you happy reading until next time. Ciao!